All right, let's get started. Welcome to today's webcast, How Universities Can Achieve Total Network Visibility in a Fast, Flexible Log Solution That Won't Break the Bank, presented by Corelight and Humio. I'm John Gamble, Director of Product Marketing here at Corelight, and I'll give you a brief preview of the agenda, and then we'll introduce today's speakers. We'll talk about some of the unique network security challenges and log management challenges that universities face. I'll present Corelight and open source Zeek and show you how that can help with the network security challenge. And then Humio will present their log management solution. And then lastly, we'll spend a good amount of time looking at some sample joint customer deployments and use case demos. And we're also joined today by a guest speaker from MSU who's going to speak on Humio's section as well, talking about their use of the Humio solution to enable a scalable SOC as a service. And lastly, we'll finish with Q&A. Just some housekeeping here. You can answer, or rather ask a question at any point during the webcast using your control panel. There is a questions tab there. Just type it in, and myself and the speakers on today's webcast will see it. We may answer questions at the point in time, or we may save them to the end, depending on the question. So feel free to ask one at any time. If we're not able to get to your question, we will follow up with you afterwards via email, so don't worry. And lastly, a recording of today's presentation will be made, so this webcast will be made available. If you'd like to share it with a colleague, or if you're not going to be able to join us for the full time and would like to finish it later, a recording will be made available and posted for viewing. So with that, let's talk about today's speakers. So myself, John Gamble, I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Corelight. My background is in data protection. I spent the last decade in privacy, technology, identity, verification services, and I've been here at Corelight for over 2 years, and it's been a very exciting ride to see the growth of our product and our market and our customer base in terms of network security monitoring with Zeek, which is kind of the open source framework that underlies our product capabilities that I'm excited to talk about on today's webcast. Jason, maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, I'm Jason Rosensteel. I'm Director of Sales for North America for Humio. I've been in the space for a long time, and I'm a veteran of a lot of some of the larger technologies in the space, such as Splunk and AppDynamics. And yeah, I come from a technical background, so there's a lot of special things to talk about Humio, so that's why I'm here today.
Awesome. And Scott?
Hi, yeah, I'm Scott Sparra, Deputy CISO for Michigan State University, formerly Head of Incident Response for MSU. Yeah, I have a long history in the security space. I've implemented a lot of different technologies. We're really excited about Humio. Yeah, have to get going.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll start by talking about some of the unique network security and log management challenges that universities might be facing today, and then we'll talk about how our solutions can help you with these challenges. So from a network visibility and security perspective, universities are typically characterized by open networks, right? You've got not borderless, but sometimes more open and permissive networks than you would find in a corporate environment. You've got, public Wi-Fi for guests on campus. It's a heavy BYOD environment. Typically, you've got students and guests and professors and all of these people bringing these devices onto campus that may not be managed, and in many cases are not managed directly by the University Security Operations Center. And so you've got a lot of traffic traversing these networks that you don't necessarily have endpoint visibility into, which means, if you can't get it on the network, you're probably not going to get any visibility on those unmanaged devices. So it's critical that you figure out the network visibility piece there. And lastly, many universities are dealing with high throughput environments, 100 gig plus environments, and with lots of encrypted traffic. Right, you've got lots of sensitive communications, lots of email that's encrypted, crossing the wire on networks at university campuses. So, all combined, it's a pretty challenging picture to secure university networks. You don't have a lot of the controls that you would have in a corporate environment where you can lock things down more tightly and more tightly control those endpoints. So it's a more pervasive, open environment in the spirit of education, but it also presents these security challenges that come with it. And of course, the attack surface is large and valuable, and universities today are facing a wide range of cybersecurity threats. There's APT threats. That's not something that just, Fortune 50 companies face. Many universities are also facing advanced persistent threats as well. That article there on the left came from earlier this year in the spring, talking about a Chinese-based APT group that was basically striking 10 plus university systems looking for military technology that they could access through research centers there. And so actually, 27 universities were targeted by that particular attack. Of course, there's also broad-based attacks like ransomware. that we've seen in the private sector in terms of healthcare. Hospitals often get targeted. Universities, same thing. And also kind of those incidental, non-malicious, non-intentful problems that you nonetheless need to deal with in a university environment, whether that's vulnerability management or things like abuse or misuse of university resources. So cryptocurrency mining, for example, became fairly popular and remains quite popular. And students tend to think that electricity and university services are free, when of course we know they're not, and will sometimes try to use their own or university resources to mine cryptocurrency. It's just an example of one of the kind of abuse or misuse of university resources that you might want to monitor in the SOC. So how do you get visibility into all of this stuff that could be happening and crossing your wire? Well, what you see there on the left is kind of the typical hodgepodge of network visibility data sources that many people reach for when they're trying to understand what's happening on their network. There's a range of logs that get generated by the various appliances in your environment, whether that's a SMTP server and you're trying to log mail-related events to that server. Firewalls generate logs if you have those in place, although in many cases you're not going to be using a firewall just because of the nature of the traffic that needs to pass through. NetFlow, of course, many people are collecting NetFlow, and then kind of packet capture, right, is the other option. If you're not going to rely on these incidental logs in your environment, you're going to probably try to capture some amount of packets for some set amount of time that the SOC can analyze. And on the right, what you see there is actually kind of a real depiction of what these data sources look like. And there's certainly answers to be found in these data sources, but it can be quite challenging to interconnect varying data formats, timestamps if they're misconfigured, and you don't always get the answers you need. Packet capture, of course, is 100% of the data crossing the wire. So if the answer's there, you will find it. You just need to know where to look. But on the other side, all of these logs, there's often data visibility gaps because these logs, in many cases, were never designed for security teams. They were designed for IT teams to do performance management and troubleshooting. So security grabs them because that's what's available, but there's often key data gaps that security teams would like in some of these logs, like NetFlow or SMTP log, that isn't captured in that environment. And this kind of can put people between a rock and a hard place where they're either not getting enough information from their environmental logs and they're missing critical security context, or there's inefficiencies in the process where they're spending too much time correlating data when really if that data was all unified, it would be a much faster process, whether that's threat hunting or incident response. And the other side, PCAP's great, but at scale, it's not a great solution because you can't store it for much longer than a few days or weeks at most in time. And if you need to go back on your network, a couple months to understand if you were hit by an APT and how that began, you're not going to have packets because you're not going to be storing them that long because it just gets too costly at scale. Jason, I think you're going to speak to this slide about some of the associated log management challenges universities face.
Yeah, thanks, John. So the things that we see in the environments that we run into in universities is that everybody wants to be data driven. They want to have 100% network visibility. And the problems that people run into is they usually can't log everything. And that's usually controlled because every university I've ever talked to is limited by their budget. And I'm sure everybody attending here is familiar with that case. And then there's always the problem that most solutions out there have a high license cost, and it usually grows when you scale. And then there's also the complexity of managing a logging solution that comes into play. And as you scale up, things become unmanageable, or there might be an index that you have to manage over and over again. And so the maintenance of that causes a lot of pain instead of having to focus on solving problems. And then the ability to have things in real time is a problem that I run into as well. Existing options out there have a limited ingest capability. And then search performance becomes an issue when you have issue scaling. So, what we run into is that current solutions struggle to handle log data volumes in real time. So that's kind of where Humio comes in, and I'll explain that in a minute.
Great. And yeah, so the good news here is that these two kind of related challenges, one of scalable network visibility and then scalable log management, which can go hand in hand, Corelight and Humio as a joint solution can address exactly those two pain points. So Corelight can provide the single comprehensive source of fast truth. And Humio is the log management platform that can store that scalably and search it quickly in a kind of cost model that's not going to break your university security budget. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Corelight and Zeek, which is the open source framework that underlies and powers our platform. And then Jason and Scott are going to talk about the Humio side of the business. So if you remember back to this slide I just showed, if this is kind of the before Corelight picture, what it can look like with Corelight is a rich set of protocol organized logs that are all interlinked, which gives you this central source of network truth, where you can very quickly pivot between these logs to understand what's happening in the network. And this logging that Corelight performs is done using the open source Zeek, formerly known as Bro, Network Security Monitoring Framework. It's an open source platform that's been around for over 2 decades. It's widely used in the EDU community. It actually was kind of born out of the public sector at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory at Berkeley, across the bay from where Corelight and San Francisco have offices here in San Francisco. And it was purpose built to comprehensively monitor network traffic for security. So it wasn't designed for IT, it wasn't designed for performance management or for high performance IT in that sense. It was designed for security. And because of that, it's connection oriented. So all of these logs, these protocol specific logs that get generated by Corelight and Zeek, they're meant to help you as the analyst, the security analyst, understand the connection in its entirety across all of the ports and protocol activity that might be associated with that connection. So what you see here in this diagram is the interlinked nature of these logs. So each of these logs come with super accurate timestamps. Files get auto hashed, so you get the SHA-1 and you also get the SHA-256 hash for any file that crosses the networks. All files get their own unique ID that Zeek and Corelight assign to it. And in green there, that UID, that's a really killer feature of Corelight and Zeek, which is that every connection gets stamped with a unique alphanumeric connection ID, which is what allows security analysts, whether you're an incident responder or a threat hunter, to quickly pivot through these logs, because all of the logs are associated with that single connection, which means you can follow a connection where an HTTP session gets generated. Well, there's an HTTP log. What did the person do next? Oh, a file was downloaded. Well, you can pivot off of that connection ID and go to the files log, et cetera, et cetera. So we often call this data rocket fuel for SOCs. I hope my explanations kind of showed you where it can drive those incredible efficiencies and speed in terms of network insight. And of course, I want to provide a hard quantification here of the value that this kind of data can provide, because it can be challenging to explain, I think. But here's a great example of where Education First, which is a global education services organization, 40,000 person organization, took our data and replaced their existing kind of NetFlow, and they were doing a little bit of PCAP collection, and they drove their average incident response time down from around 3 hours to a matter of minutes. Now, were they able to resolve every incident in a matter of minutes? No, some required, of course, more investigation, but on average, they drove their average incident response time down by nearly 95%, which is incredible. And if you think about it, the common problem in security from a human resources perspective is that everyone's understaffed. There's too much work, too many alerts, too many things to get through to get through them quickly. And if you can improve efficiency, you can address more issues more quickly and reduce risk faster. So it's not just logging that Corelight does. We provide 3 key functionalities. We generate comprehensive logs. We extract and reassemble files from wire traffic, support over 200 different file types there. We also deduplicate those files, so we're not extracting the same file 1,000 times. And also, of course, that files log gets generated with every file. And lastly, Zeek provides a custom Turing-complete programming language on top of all the great data it provides, which means with Corelight, which runs open source Zeek, you can drive custom insights on top of this data and drive them to a platform like Humio, where you can actually see, further analyze and investigate these insights as well. And some great examples of that are cryptocurrency, which I mentioned earlier, is kind of a challenge at some universities. There's actually a package that the open source community developed that monitors for certain cryptocurrency protocol mining activity. So it generates an alert in the notice log, and that you can stream that to Humio, and then with Corelight plus Humio, you can suddenly get insight into cryptocurrency traffic patterns on your network, as an example. From a quick deployment perspective, Corelight is out of band, so we rely on upstream packet brokers or traffic mirroring capabilities to be able to feed us the live copy of traffic. We offer a suite of sensors in physical, virtual, and cloud format sensors that actually take those raw packets, process them, and turn them into the logs, extracted files, and custom insights that I just talked about. On top of that, you can overlay third-party intelligence data if you want, so you can actually pre-match IOCs against some of the data that's being generated by these sensors. And you can also append environmentally specific data to our sensors as well from your own environment. I'll talk about a great example of that one of our joint customers is doing today, but it allows you to do really cool things like overlay data unique to your environment, such as the names of servers in your environment. So those get pre-processed when the logs get streamed to Humio. So you have that added rich context around the data. Real quick on our product line, as I mentioned, we support three formats, cloud, virtual, and physical appliances. We have a range of physical appliances sized by throughput. We're fully capable of scaling to large university networks. I think our largest deployment to date is in excess of 300 gigabits per second. So with a packet loss rate of far less than 1%. So scale is not a challenge for Corelight. We can certainly work with your network no matter how big or small, because at the lower end of the range, we have the IP200 for physical appliances. Virtual sensor, we support VMware and Hyper-V. And on the cloud sensor, we currently support the Amazon cloud environment with AMI as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, sorry, just a few more slides really quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jason and Scott. Our management console. So we're not providing that pane of glass to analyze the data. That's the role of our partner ecosystem, i.e. Humio here. So we don't store the logs. We don't store the logs for customers. That's where Humio fits into this picture here. But we do provide a management console, which allows you to seamlessly manage, configure, and monitor your Corelight sensors as they're deployed in your environment. So this is just a quick snapshot from the home page. You can see the log rates respectively in your environment in real time. So if there's a certain spike in a protocol that looks strange, you can see that and investigate it. Exporting the data, of course, is one of the main parts of setting up our sensors. The whole setup process is really fast. It really just takes a matter of minutes to get Corelight sensors set up and the data exported to Humio. You can export via JSON over TCP, which is how many of our joint customers are exporting to Humio. You can also filter out logs you don't want. So if there's certain logs you don't want to send to Humio, you can filter them out right there. You can see examples of the NTLM and Kerberos logs being filtered out. Setup really is a matter of minutes. You're off and running. The data is being streamed to Humio, but you can check into our management console just to manage the health and performance of your sensors as well. And also enabling some of those packages, those insights that I mentioned, can be done in our dashboard as well. So I think I mentioned the Bitcoin detector there, that second red circle you see. Simple radio toggle on off. If you turn it on, now you're getting that sort of insight in our data that's being streamed to Humio. All right, Jason, I'm going to give you keyboard and mouse control here.
Wonderful.
Let me know if you can control my screen. There we go.
We good?
You're good.
Okay. Wonderful. Here we are. Well, here's Humio, guys. So Humio is a system that's it's modern. We came out in about 2016, and we're designed for this this world where the complexity and the log volumes are growing. So in the network monitoring scenario with Corelight, we have this complex environment, a lot of ingest coming in, and so as that log, in order to handle that log data and be able to give you the real-time visibility you need, we are designed to give you sub-second ingest latency at any scale. We can provide streaming live shareable dashboards. We have the ability to scale up to hundreds of terabytes a day. Some of the key points in Humio and scalability is we can, another comparative to other log management solutions is that we're purpose built from the ground up. We basically build our data store from scratch in order just for this use case. So that means that we can scale far better. So we can do up to a terabyte a day ingest on a single node, for example. We just recently did a scalability thing on, we did 100 terabytes a day on 25 nodes, and we can, if you contact me, I can give you all the white papers on that. So basically, Humio is designed to give you 100% visibility no matter what scale of environment you have. Our backend's designed from scratch, so you have efficient your data lifecycle story is a little different because you can do about 10 to 20x compression on the back end, which means you have a larger hot searchable data store. And our deployment model is flexible. We can live wherever your data lives. On premise, of course, for most of the university deployments that I deal with, we do have public cloud option, and we do have the option to do a private cloud, and we can do a hybrid scenario as well. And our architecture is designed to be multi-tenant, which means that we can, we have the power to give you that multi-tenancy internally. And so Humio, in its core, is designed to let you log everything to answer any question you have for it. And with the barriers that are present today, there's technological barriers, which I'm giving you examples of how Humio can address those, but there's also commercial barriers. So that leads to one of the biggest compelling things that Humio brings to the table, especially for the university use case, is that we have unlimited ingest pricing options for a fixed price, which means as you scale your logging volume, or you're trying to build up your capabilities, and you're facing a growing logging cost, what Humio has been able to provide for customers is the ability to say, hey, we're going to fix that, and we're going to provide you that solution that can scale into any use case throughout your environment. So beyond the generalizations there, some of the capabilities within Humio, it's an all-in-one system that allows you to ingest any structured or unstructured text-based data. So it means you can handle any metrics and logs. So when we hook into Corelight and take in the Corelight data, we function primarily as a SIEM, but we do have greater capabilities than a SIEM, because a SIEM would only give you a correlation capability across the subset of data that you're getting from the security part. But with Humio, you can take in any data from your environment, which gives you greater correlation capability, which gives you, more context and more rich insights that are possible. One of the special things about Humio is we allow you to do sub-second ingest latency, which makes it so you can have live dashboards, live searches, live alerts, no matter what the scale. And I'll explain that in the next slide. Our live search capability is a unique thing about Humio. We do have the ability to do historical search, and we don't rely on a heavy index to accomplish that. And that's also a very special thing about Humio. And we do store data on a time series, which is very important for threat hunting and incident response. In the alerting side of things, we allow you to monitor all the infrastructure live, and we do have integrations with various alerting alerting frameworks like Slack, PagerDuty, VictorOps, OpsGenie, email, of course. And then you can accomplish automation through the use of webhooks and our API. The reporting capabilities of Humio is we have live shareable dashboards, which is a unique feature that you'll only see in Humio, which means I can give people read-only access to a live dashboard, which is compelling for a lot of our cases. You can export files for forensics, and we have the ability to build apps. And John will demonstrate the Corelight app on top of Humio. So you can build an app or a SIEM type of experience on top of Humio that comes in the form of pre-built searches, dashboards, alerts, parsers, things of that nature. Now, to explain a little bit some of the special things about Humio is we think of Humio as kind of a real-time processing engine, in that we can take data from any source. You can stream data to our API, you can stream it over TCP, UDP, you can also pull it from agents. So any of the open source agents out there, the Elastic protocol, the Splunk HEC protocol, those agents send into Humio to be ingested. Everything's normalized on the timestamp, the fields are parsed, inputs are validated, and then we leverage Kafka on the digestion phase in order to provide the live access to your data. John, and the auto update that has nothing to do with Humio. That was awesome. So anyways, the difference between Humio and a lot of the other technologies out there is we have the ability to have live searches no matter, so that means sub-second latency, ingest latency. And that's because we're leveraging streaming technology like Kafka on the front end, which means that searches can be in-memory state machines upon ingestion. So that we don't have to follow the old model of I have to index something stored on a data store and then access that data store in order to accomplish the real time. So that's a special thing about Humio that is leveraged very heavily in all the university use cases. And then on our data store, we built that from scratch, so there's a lot of efficiencies there in terms of the storage and a lot of the HA capability. So in terms of efficiency and deployment on Humio typically on average requires about 75% less hardware resources to deploy than existing solutions that are out there. And overall, one of the biggest value propositions that universities benefit from is the lower total cost of ownership associated with either managing or maintaining logging infrastructure or paying for the hardware or server costs. The special thing on the commercial side of Humio is that we do have ingest volume pricing by raw ingest per day, but what we said one day was hey, our whole thing is to make logging, let everybody log everything to answer anything. And one of the biggest hurdles that everybody faces is the commercial hurdle. And at certain scales, it doesn't make sense to count how much log volume you're going to ingest, because it's going to keep growing, or you're trying to capture all the network data, or any number of reasons why your infrastructure is growing or being complex. And so what we did was we created a fixed price site license model, which allows you to have an all-you-can-eat license on a fixed price, so that way no matter what you scale, your logging, you don't have to worry about your log ingest. And we also have special pricing with the Corelight devices. So we do an unlimited ingest off the Corelight device for if you were to buy the Humio plus Corelight option, and that does also gives you the fixed priced unlimited ingest coming off the Corelight device or any open source Zeek cluster. So the power of Humio by removing the objections around the commercial limitations and the technological ability to ingest everything no matter what the scale and handle it, as we allow you to log everything and have full data fidelity, maintain 100% live visibility and monitoring. We allow give you instant operational insights, and we provide easy ad hoc search and discovery. We can do free text searching. You can pull fields out at search time, all the key high-end features that you might be used to experiencing today. And we also offer the fast deployment with the lower amount of resources required, and then that gives you an overall efficient ROI. And then we have many different types of happy customers beyond universities, but you'll see some university logos in there as well. But the university segment has been a favorite of mine because we are genuinely solving the problem that a lot of the folks are having around being able to having to scale and meet the security requirement needs that you have, and being constrained by the budget. And so it's very nice to be able to help universities in their endeavors. And I want to turn it over to Scott Sparza from Michigan State University to cite his use case of Humio before we turn it back over to John. So Scott, take it away.
Yeah, I'll just give a brief history of where we were at prior to getting to this point. We were effectively stuck at a point with the industry-leading solution where we could only ingest 500 gigabytes a day. We were spending tons of engineering hours trying to rewrite logs to try to stay within that license, cutting data out just to maintain a level of service that was acceptable to our incident response team. But where we ended up was we were frequently hitting a wall where we couldn't really manage an incident end-to-end inside our SIM solution, which, what's the point of having that then, right? So we did a demo with Humio, and we really liked what we saw. We ended up moving real fast. We swapped out the industry-leading solution with Humio across our entire organization within 2 weeks. That's how fast we wanted to move on it. We've had a lot of success in that area. We've brought in threat feeds, our numerous threat feeds that we couldn't bring in before because we literally didn't have capacity. In our first 2 weeks of bringing on the bulk of our threat feeds, we blocked 3 billion additional attacks. So we're seeing the ROI that we expected to get out of that. When you're looking at doing log volume licensing in the old model, you kind of question your ROI a lot. In this case, we don't have to. If we see a log source we want, we go for it. We onboard it in a single day, right? So on top of that, one of the other huge benefits we saw was the ability to do RBOC in I would consider it more like a database style view on the data repos that Humio offers. Effectively, yeah, just think about it like a database view where you can limit the fields that you're exposing to your roles, which was huge for us because there were some log forms that we wanted to expose to our IT operational staff that may have had some sensitive fields, right? Maybe some web access logs where people are posting sensitive information, and we wanted to restrict that. We couldn't easily restrict that from one role to another in our previous solution without replicating the data. So that was a huge issue for us that we were able to solve. We're now building out our final version, which is going to have 896 CPU cores. That's going to move us up to 3 terabytes a day of ingest, the ability to retain that data for up to 6 months, and alongside that, we're going to have the ability to store 2 days of most log sources just in RAM. So we'll be seeing search speeds up to over a terabyte a second on just our search capability. So we're really excited about that. And moving forward with our next step is a lot of these public sectors are also in the same position. They're all stuck. They're all working with the same log formats, writing them, rewriting them, trying to figure out ways to do the correlation across them. We're all using the same stuff. So what we're trying to do, and seem to have some success doing, is partnering with these other public sector organizations and bringing all our log solutions into one final solution. So, oh, sorry, did I cut out there?
You cut out. If you could just repeat the last 10 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. So we're partnering with those other organizations, bringing their log formats in, and with the horizontal scalability we're seeing with Humio, it just makes a lot of sense. We can just keep throwing hardware and different nodes at the solution, and it just keeps scaling. We're not seeing diminishing returns or any of that stuff. So we're really excited about the future partnership with Humio.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Let's see. I think, Jason, you've still got control. If you can advance to the next slide.
Yes, sir. It's not going. Okay. Yeah, so how to get Humio. So I just want to let you guys know, if you want to reach out and have any questions regarding how we may be able to service you, you can contact me, and our team directly at sales@humio.com. We do have free on-premise and cloud trials available. That's also handy, so you can do a 30-day trial with us, or you can do a free cloud tier up to 2 gigs a day ingest, also found there. We do have a very active and very loving Slack community. If you join @meethumio, and you can sign up for that at community.humio.com, and you'll find a lot of different university customers talking back and forth, and you can ask any question of anybody and get pretty much any answer. There you go, John.
Awesome. All right, we're in the final section here. So we're going to look at some joint Corelight and Humio deployments in the university space with 3 different anonymous deployments. And then I'm going to show some sample security use cases in the Humio platform where you can drive more efficient and more powerful incident responsive threat hunting workflows with the rich data Corelight provides in the Humio platform. So I'll actually kind of frame those challenges and then show you in the Humio platform in real time what that can look like. So I think, Jason, you'll lead us off talking about some of these deployments.
Yep. So there's what we thought was helpful to show you today was a few different examples of how people are deploying this solution, because I think one of the biggest questions is, well, this is all great, but what are the different ways that it's actually being used? One of the common ways here is a solution where I might have an open source Zeek cluster, and I need to migrate to, and I bought some Corelight, and I need to have a SIEM attached to it, and I ended up getting excited about Humio, so I want to migrate into the Corelight Humio scenario. So what I'm going to show you here is this university, started out on his open source Zeek, and he was doing about 6 gigs throughput through a Zeek cluster. I think it was two nodes, and how he was solving and going through the logs was just manual grepping. And so The problems faced were that grep was very inefficient, as anybody familiar with having to deal with it through that way is familiar. Open source Zeek was having performance issues and the limited capacity for the amount of in the cluster, and the cost of maintaining the time to resolution was just becoming unmanageable. So the solution was they went ahead and got a Corelight 3000. They actually replaced the 2 boxes of Zeek. That's a typo on my part, with the Corelight 3000, and then the logs on disk and manual grep. So that's also a typo. That should say Humio. The how the Corelight 3000 coupled with the Humio solved all these problems were that they increased the throughput and had them only manage to maintain 1 box instead of 2, and they were able to see all the logs in one place through Humio's single pane of glass, because Humio's being able to ingest everything and putting it all in one place. And then they were able to experience a lower total cost of ownership and better performance. And then they were able to also further ask any question across all that data, which they weren't able to do before. When you're doing manual grepping, you can only ask certain questions within the context of that one box that you're grepping into. But now, since you have everything in one place, you can ask questions across all that data. And then below is an example of the box where that the Humio is on. And for those not familiar, the Corelight 3000 box is a maximum throughput of 25 gigabytes.
Hey, Jason, if we can go back for 1 sec, I just want to add one thing on this deployment. The open source Zeek migration to Corelight is a frequent kind of customer conversion we see, especially in the university space, since Zeek is so popular at universities. And you might be wondering, well, why pay Corelight when open source is quote free? Of course, open source is never free. There's always costs associated with managing open source. But just to quickly kind of touch on why this customer, made these conversions, there's a number of advantages Corelight can offer you beyond the open source capabilities, which are already quite powerful. We were actually founded by the inventor of Zeek and some of the key open source contributors. And so these appliances in particular that we've developed, one key differentiator for us is performance. So Jason mentioned that in this case, this was an AP3000, the Corelight AP3000 sensor. That's our top of the line physical appliance, which can do actually in excess, in many cases, of 25 gigabits per second of traffic throughput processing. It has a unique feature which we have developed called shunting that allows you to take large elephant flows. So let's say you're a big research university and you've got people transmitting back and forth multi-gigabyte or terabyte files across the network or across universities, right? If you're in a collaborative research environment, you don't want to spend CPU processing that entire flow necessarily, because it's a lot of proprietary encrypted and/or compressed data. So you can actually shunt it, and you can basically program it to say, if I see large repetitive flows that I don't want to analyze, I can save that. So in some cases, one box can support well in excess of 25 gigabits per second of traffic. But performance, among other reasons, is one key reason we see a lot of university customers making the switch from open source Zeek to Corelight. There's also kind of the manageability aspect, right? That management dashboard I showed you earlier, those screenshots, that doesn't exist in the open source world. It's a command line interface to manage open source Zeek, which can prove challenging in certain cases. And we've taken that pain away and given you this rich GUI that you can manage everything about your sensors with. So just wanted to add that comment to this deployment.
Excellent. So another use case out there today is a university with distributed sites. So in that scenario, you have a centralized site with their SoC, and then they have the remote campuses that have local monitoring. So the challenges with a distributed deployment like this is oftentimes the bandwidth from the sites back to the SOC is limited. So what do you do? So in this scenario, what they deployed were in the SoC, they had 2 C1000 Corelight boxes, 1 C3000 and 2 C200s. John can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But and then each site funneling data back to the SoC, there are 2 C1000s as well. The aggregate data volume they're pushing through is 5.5 terabytes a day. Now, they're not pushing all the data back to the SoC from each site. What they ended up doing was deploying local Humio in each of the sites, but they do push the alerts back through a an event hub that they run through AWS, and those alerts go into the SOC's Humio instance where they're able to do their incident response and analysis there. So this is an example of deploying Humio and Corelight across multiple sites and in a way to accomplish that. The interesting things, pain points there is to handle all the volume, as you can see, they generate. They need to have some sort of pricing model where they have unlimited ingest to be able to consolidate all the log analytics they want to have. And they want to also extend their logging capability to be able to retire legacy logging solutions and other things that are out there. So in a lot of universities, there's lots of systems that have been around for a long time. And so instead of having multiple different logging solutions in place, Humio is able to afford them the ability to do that with an unlimited ingest license. And then also the reduced maintenance costs associated with the remote site logging was an issue as well, because now you have all your experts, a limited amount of experts that are all present in the SOC, that instead of having to hire people in the remote locations to also manage it, they can manage everything remotely with the new Humio solution. So in this case, they started out with the Corelight plus Humio joint solution to use Humio to ingest the high volume of data coming out the Corelight devices because it was the most cost-effective way to do that. And then the second year of being a customer, they ended up going with a site license to get the unlimited ingest model to be able to start solving those needs that I pointed out. So the capabilities afforded by the solution were that they are enabled to standardize their logging and experience the cost savings because of that, because they're able to implement Humio for every use case, no matter what it is. You could even use it for academic use cases. They did cite that the Humio log ingest capability is unmatched, and the interesting thing is that 5.5 terabytes a day is ingested on 3 Humio nodes at the main site, and then then each of the remote sites have a 3-node cluster just for data replication. But the data coming off those C2000s, which is an aggregate of about 20 G, can be handled on a single Humio node. But they only implement a 3-node cluster at each of the sites for data replication purposes. But it's important to note that you're doing at the SOC, they're doing 120K events per second on 3 nodes, and their data compression they're experiencing on the back end is roughly 7.5x. And so some of the other cool things that they were able to experience is the lower total cost of ownership, is they're able to maintain everything with one person, and their maintenance on it is logged at about 30 minutes a week average to maintain all the Humio clusters. And then the Humio site license, of course, with the fixed price and the low cost, as you probably saw in the previous slide, it just makes it a no-brainer for a lot of reasons. Now, John, you want to comment on this deployment?
Yeah, I'll just add 2 more things to that great summary. This customer is also doing some really cool things with Corelight and the underlying open source Seek capabilities around, I mentioned earlier in the deployment diagram when I was presenting kind of how Corelight deploys, that you can actually overlay your own environmental data on top of the logs, or rather append them into this logging framework. And so this customer is doing a pretty cool thing where they've taken advantage of that input framework to append their own internal environmental data. Specifically, they've got multiple campuses here, so they're appending kind of server names and IT contact info. So when these logs get streamed to Humio, they're already enriched with the environmentally specific data that the end user, the analyst, needs. So if there's an incident, for example, that concerns a specific campus with a specific server, they already have the relevant IT contact information built into the logging framework, so they can view that directly in Humio and pick up that phone or send that email very quickly. So it's a great example of the extensibility and flexibility of the open source Seek platform that Corelight supports in our products put to use. And the other thing I'll mention about this customer is I think they're an exquisite example of kind of taking advantage of that third key capability of Corelight and open source Seek, which is insight driving. So you can actually script on top of all of the data and pre-process the data and send those insights downstream to Humio. So this customer's developed, this university's developed a lot of custom tuned behavioral scripts to monitor their environment, because once you basically can baseline what looks like normal in your environment, you ingest the Corelight logs in Humio, you look at it, you understand the traffic patterns, you can baseline and normalize what your environment should look like, then you can start automating insights by writing these Zeek scripts and deploying them via the Corelight sensor to generate insights about anomalies in your environment. And then those anomalies will appear in the Humio platform. So it's a great example, I think, of someone taking advantage of that customizability and insights capability that Corelight and Zeek provide. Last deployment case, Jason?
Yes, so now there's another use case that's coming up a lot in universities is you may want to establish or upgrade a border security type project. And this is something where, okay, now I realize that I have to maintain the security at my borders, and I have a lot of endpoints and how do I maintain 100% network visibility? A lot of times this is associated with a longer need, a mandated need for a long retention. You want to be able to have the anomaly detection capabilities, the traffic analysis capabilities, and you want to be able to see across your infrastructure to enhance what you would ordinarily see maybe out of instead of purchasing a couple of different point solution seams. And then you still need to be able to do it with strict budget constraints. So this is a lot of scenarios that we run into. And in this university's case, they needed to enhance their border security, so they went with deploying multiple Corelight C3000s, and John, I don't know the exact number, and they further enhanced their capability for analysis by ingesting all the different devices from all the border infrastructure, and then they also coupled it with some of the internal infrastructure as well. And then they further leveraged the Humio unlimited ingest site license in order to accomplish this to fit within the tight budget they had. And with the Humio, you're able to extend the capabilities of SIEM, yet still have the capabilities of the SIEM. So I'm able to do the live alerting and be able to do the 100% visibility and still be able to get a deeper dive in the analysis once I start investigating, and the enhanced correlation capability. And then the Humio log ingest and search speed that they implemented to improve this enabled them to have a greater level of adoption, and people were actually using the solution as opposed to avoiding using it. And then the data compression of the Humio data store made it trivial for them to be able to store the 180 to 360 day retention requirements that they had. And to note, the Humio data store itself today has an average of a 10x compression on the back end. We're working on an algorithm now that it will yield about 20 to 30x compression, and that should be out within the next 6 months, and still maintain the ability to do index-free hot searching and still give you the live access to your data as well. So contact me more if you'd like to see white papers on that. And again, the site license and the fixed price, always a compelling thing for universities, and especially in this case where you're going to have a large scale of all kinds of network traffic and data that you don't even know. You might not know what your full scope might be when you go to dive into this type of project. So John, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think this is another great example of the joint scalability of our respective solutions. This is a huge network traffic throughput environment that was deployed here. So both the network data processing side from Corelight and also the data storage side from Humio. But not only can we succeed in these very large, high-end, high-scale deployments, but the solution is super elastic in terms of its ability. This joint solution we offer, it can go up or down. So you might be a smaller community college with throughput speeds that fall far below what this particular university was seeing at their border. We can also kind of scale down to that environment and support you there as well. And I think that's kind of one of the power of these kind of joint solution between the two of us is it's highly flexible and highly scalable no matter your environment. Jason, anything to add before I go to some use cases here?
No, I think this is a good summary for now.
Awesome. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to flip through a few use cases somewhat quickly here, try to save some room for Q&A at the end. So I'll show you kind of 3 kind of sample use cases here. One built around encrypted traffic insight and imagining that you're threat hunting encrypted traffic. One built around DNS insight and DNS hunting activity. And then finally a third one based around an incident response workflow. And kind of the takeaway here is these are the ease and speed with which you can get these kind of insights out of the Humio Corelight solution is quite impressive when compared to certainly grepping against kind of raw data stores that are full of a bunch of different data sources about your network that aren't all formatted correctly, and maybe the timestamps aren't aligned. You're going to see kind of in action in these use cases here what I mean when I say rocket fuel for your sock, based on the speed of these insights. So in the interest of time, I'll just flip quickly through these slides and then pivot into Humio here in a second. So, all right, encrypted attacks, right? A lot of the traffic crossing your network right now is encrypted. Does that mean you can't see anything about it if you're not breaking and inspecting? Absolutely not. There is a lot of detail you can get about the handshake itself and the certificate details that Zeek and Corelight can parse and turn into rich logs streamed to Humio. So there's the SSL log, there's the Kerberos log, there's the X509A log or X509 log for every certificate that crosses the wire, it gets its own log. There's a lot of things you can tell about encrypted traffic without actually breaking and inspecting it. You can identify it wherever it occurs. You can parse those details about the handshake and the certificate. You can provide context around the encrypted traffic stream, so you can connect it to unencrypted parts of an attack potentially. And you can automate analysis, of course, with Zeek's insight-driven capabilities that Corelight supports. So let's just imagine here, I'm going to pivot into Humio. Let's just imagine here that we're interested in looking at encrypted traffic that Corelight has parsed in the Humio platform. So let me go into full screen mode here. So I'm going to show you a dashboard. So Jason mentioned we've pre-built some dashboards in Humio that kind of expose the Corelight data. And these are great starting points for kind of threat hunt exercises or just general health checks, security health checks in your environment. So let's take a look here at the SSL log, for example. Oh no.
You need to refresh. You've been idle for too long.
There we go. Let me just sign back in. Sorry about that.
It auto kicked you out.
There we go. All right, let's go to the dashboards. So I'm going to go back into the SSL dashboard. So these are aggregate level summaries of SSL traffic characteristics that we've pre-aggregated in Humio in these rich dashboards you see that are based on the Zeek Corelight parse data. And you can see some interesting things here. You can see kind of the top subjects in your environment. You can see different TLS versions, right? So this is demo data that comes from a red teaming exercise. So it's not from a live customer environment. So we see here that there's a lot of outdated TLS traffic. So you can quickly get a sense of the health of the encrypted traffic in your environment. But let's go back to that hypothesis about attackers are using encrypted traffic. Well, what's one way that we can go start to investigate that hypothesis? Well, those attackers are probably not using great encryption hygiene. They're probably not using certificates to encrypt their traffic from authorized certificate authorities. They're probably self-signing their certificates. So here in this dashboard down here on the left, we've pre-aggregated the use of self-signed certificates here. So we can see there's a count of 7 instances of self-signed certificates. Let's take a quick look at that. Great. What you're seeing here, these are logs. Each one of these rows here are a log. Let's take a look at this SSL log here. So this is a connection. This is an SSL Corelight generated log that is using a self-signed certificate. So if I pull up here, the bottom, and I look quickly, so this is the actual SSL log itself. And I'm looking through it, and let's see here. Well, that looks sort of interesting. The issuer information, Obama@us.com, registered to the Gaza City. Well, that might not be malicious. It's certainly suspicious and worth digging into deeper. Here, this row, this alphanumeric string you see here, the ABDB string, this is the JA3 hash. So someone in the open source Zeek community developed a hashing mechanism whereby the client server handshake is hashed. And so you can actually fingerprint SSL connections. So I could take that hash and query it back to the community and say, hey, have we seen this before? The other thing I'll point out here is I'm interested, now I'm starting to be suspicious about this self-signed SSL connection. Here's the UID. I mentioned at the beginning that Zeek and Corelight assign a unique connection ID to every connection. Now I want to know, well, what else is associated with this somewhat suspicious encrypted connection? Show me everything else in the environment associated with that particular connection. Is there any other traffic outside of SSL associated with this connection? In fact, there is. So here we see 4 more logs. We see a files log, a connection log, which is kind of like a NetFlow log on steroids, an SSL log, an intelligence log. That's interesting. So you can, as I mentioned, you can overlay IOCs and intelligence feeds against Corelight's data, and it will generate a log if there's a hit. So associated with this encrypted connection that has a suspicious certificate, I've got an Intel hit. What is that Intel hit on? It's a JA3 hit. So someone in the community has recognized this encrypted connection as being associated with malicious activity. Now I've gone from broad level hypothesis that attackers will be using poor encryption hygiene. They'll probably be self-signing. I narrowed in on a set of self-signed certificates being used in my environment. I was able to dig deep into each of those aspects of the connection. And now I have community validation that what I'm looking at is probably something I need to address and escalate in my environment. Not only that, but I mentioned about context, right? So just because it's encrypted doesn't mean you can't tell things about the encryption. Here's a files log that got generated. So somewhere in this connection that we're looking at, there was an unencrypted file event. And if I scroll down to it, I can actually pull out the SHA hash here and query that against VirusTotal. So that's an added bit of context that I get because Zeek and Corelight look at the connection holistically and not just as a point in time packet parsing event. I can get that context around the encrypted connection here in the SHA-256. So I'll do one last query just to demonstrate the platform to you here. Let's imagine you're dealing with a phishing alert and you need to investigate it really quickly. Let's say the URL is mybusinessdoc.com. So the first question I have as an incident responder is this thing real? So I plug that in. I get all of the Corelight logs generated off of that URL. So everywhere in my environment, these are the logs that have been generated. I'm going to look at this HTTP log here. I'll just start there. What's going on here? In this HTTP log, I see that there's some file activity associated with this HTTP session. I can see that the file name is a .gif or .gif, but there's a mismatch between the file name and the MIME type, which gets parsed. It's an executable. That's suspicious. I'm going to take that file ID that Zeek and Corelight tag every file with, plug it back into Humio. Now I want to see everywhere else this file's appeared. Particularly, I want to look at the files log itself, because the files log itself contains the hash. And I can take that hash. Here's an MD5 hash, and I can check it against VirusTotal. Oh boy, the community thinks this is malware. I now have a problem. So in 60 seconds, I've gone from, is this phishing alert among 1,000 alerts that I have to process in my environment valid or not? I'm pretty sure it's valid. Now I need to go into incident response mode. I'm going to exit out there and go back to the presentation. And in the interest of time and questions, we've got 1 or 2 minutes left here. So here's our contact information. If you have questions about Corelight, feel free to reach out to us at info@corelight.com, Humio, that's sales@humio.com. And if you're interested in following up with Scott about the collaborative managed SOC as a service feature that he announced or that he mentioned, you can reach out to him there at that address as well. Scott and Jason, do you have anything to add to that before we go to Q&A for 1 or 2 questions?
No, I just would like to see if anybody has any interesting questions.
Yeah, let's see here. All right,
Same.
we have, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Oh, I just said same.
Okay, great. So we have one question here asking about how Corelight logs compare to NetFlow and PCAP specifically. Are they a replacement for those or for those data sources rather? For NetFlow, I would say for security use cases, absolutely. The connection log that Corelight and Zeek generate can totally replace NetFlow. Not only that, it's giving you all the rich protocol activity around that connection. From the PCAP side, I would say sometimes, and it depends. Many of our customers collect both PCAP and generate Zeek Corelight logs in addition because they actually can help drive efficiencies for when you do need to pivot into PCAP. You can use the timestamps in the logs to pivot directly into the packets you need to investigate. We have seen cases though where customers have taken these logs as a wholesale replacement for PCAP. It just depends on your risk tolerance in terms of if you ever need to go to packet level detail, will you need those packets or not? But we often find that these logs can replace that in a majority of security use cases. Let's see, we're kind of at time here, so I think we'll wrap on that question. Jason and Scott, thank you so much for joining me on the line today. For those whose questions we didn't get to answer, I'll follow up with you afterwards. And again, this will be made available as a recording so you can share with your colleagues. So look for an email follow-up from us after today's broadcast. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining and take care. Until next time.